Welcome to Athletic Ambitions with me, Fiona Carter.
And me, Tom Barlow.
We are here to share the stories of our Cass and Friends athletes, aspiring Olympians and world champions. We will also interview elite athletes and professionals. They will be sharing their stories, the ups and downs and bumpy ride that their journey may have. We will learn how they persevere and deal with setbacks, train and compete at the highest level, and how their mindset helps with every step of the way. So if you want to hear about our upcoming athletes and learn from the best, this podcast is for you.
This is Athletic Ambitions, where every journey begins with a single step.
Good morning, Josie. Thank you so much for being on our Cass and Friends Athletic Ambitions podcast. Absolutely brilliant to meet you. I've followed you for a long time and we've had a little chat. I think we probably could have chatted for about 2 hours before we did the podcast, but thank you so much. I'm an absolute fan of your books. I'm pretty sure you've written 5, but just another one to come out, which we can perhaps talk about at the end. But certainly the one that you've published for teenage athletes, and a lot of our athletes have read that and have been given copies. And I love the one that you did for coaches as well, the Performing Under Pressure book as well. And your 10 Pillars of Success all went up onto my Instagram. So absolute fan and delighted to talk to you. So thank you very much for being on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I know, obviously, your background in sport is marathon Ironman races. I just did my first one a couple of weeks ago. But I think you had your sort of defining moment in terms of a career change on a beach in Australia. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how your journey started into sports psychology?
Sure. I wasn't actually a sports psychologist. I don't even think it really existed as a career when I left school. So I actually started in journalism and then I was a communications director. And my last, I always call it my grown-up job, but my last kind of proper job was as comms director for Nuffield Health. So I was looking after hospitals and gyms. And so I'd done all my training for Ironman Melbourne in our lovely but only 20-metre nice chlorinated pool in Covent Garden. Yeah. And then I got onto the beach in Frankston where the swim is, and the day before it was beautiful. I was like, this is going to be nice. The morning of, we get onto the beach, the waves are horrific. I'm looking terrified. My husband's an Aussie, even he was looking terrified. And the guys on the tannoy went, you can't control those waves, you can control how you feel about them. I was like, proper little light bulb moment of going, oh yeah, if I think about this a bit differently and if I use my brain, maybe I could do okay. And I've never been sporty. I still struggle to think of myself as sporty. I was the kid who took pride in being last out of the changing rooms at school, hanging onto the heater before we had to go out and play hockey in those tiny little skirts, freezing cold. Yeah. So I'm definitely not sporty. But I'd always I'm quite brainy, I think. So it was suddenly that moment of like, oh, if I use my brain a bit more, I might be able to do better at the sports side of it. And I got in the water. It was horrific. I've seen videos. They still make me feel sick. Yeah. I don't think I came out of the water anywhere near where I was supposed to be. It was just kind of running along the beach for miles. But I did the Ironman and I finished, I still remember that one because I finished in 10:59, which is my fastest. Wow. Ironman. And then afterwards we had a bit more time in Australia and I was kind of really thinking about, oh, this makes sense. Why don't more people know this? Why didn't I know about it? And I started to look at books, and I think Steve Peters was pretty famous then, but that was kind of about it really. And ironically, the most famous sports psychologist in Steve Peters isn't a psychologist.
Yes.
He's a psychiatrist. And so I kind of started researching it, and I probably gone as far as I could in my comms career, and I wasn't loving what I was doing. My husband was like, oh, take a year out. Never had a year out when you were younger. So I quit that, and about 30 minutes later signed up to a master's in psychology. So I did that for a year, which was really fascinating to kind of just understand behaviour a little better and why we behave the way we do. And then I had to do a master's in sport and exercise psychology, which was great on the theory of of sports psychology, not good on the how you actually do it. And then I discovered you have to do 3 years of supervised practice, actually learning how to do it properly and safely, and being able to be effective as a practitioner. So that all finished in 2018, and then I've been working kind of fully qualified ever since.
Yes, amazing. It is a huge, long journey, isn't it? Because we've got one of our alumni athletes is a cracking young lady who's done her sports science degree at Bath University, and she really wants to qualify as a sports psychologist, but it's going to cost her about £20,000, and she'll be 29 by the time she's actually ready to earn a living. So sadly, I think she's decided to become a sports physiologist because it's a bit quicker and a bit cheaper. It's a lot of hoops to jump through, isn't it?
It is. And there's not actually that many jobs doing it. So those of us, I reckon there's probably 300 full-time employed sports psychs, and there's at least that trying to train each year. And then there's some of us that run our own practices. But a lot of people are actually lecturers doing kind of a bit on the side of that kind of work. So I think you can make a brilliant career out of it at the end, but you have to have that money really to invest in to be able to start.
Well, you've got your fabulous private practice, and tell us a bit about the athletes that you typically work with. I think you've sometimes classified them into, you've got different personality types, you've got your realists, you've got your VIPs. Tell us what those words mean to you.
Well, so probably about 80% of the people I see or come to me are coming because they've got really bad performance anxiety. Oftentimes they're throwing up before competitions. They might be ruminating over and over about the fear of this competition, sometimes for days, even weeks beforehand. And it's sucking all of the joy out of what they do. And they're really stressed because they're performing brilliantly in training and they're not being able to pull that out of the bag when they need to in competition. So they perform much worse in competition than training. And over the years, I've been able to see that they tend to have some very specific traits in common. And the two most obvious, most common ones: highly intelligent, because it means their brain is really good at over predicting what might happen to them, and perfectionistic, because they then see any type of opportunity to be judged, like a competition, as an opportunity to fail. Because if you're looking at something going, I must be perfect, well, the only opposition to that is total failure. And seeing as perfection is impossible for everybody, you're only going to fail. And that's terrifying to kind of the threat system in your brain that then has a huge impact on how your body performs. So very often it's people who are VIPs, very intelligent perfectionists. And more I'm also seeing that those people are neurodiverse in some way, often ADHD, and sometimes autism as well. And all of those elements just seem to combine to make it really, really difficult to go into a competition feeling confident.
Yeah, that's a little segue into your new book, isn't it? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your new book that you just published?
Well, it's coming out in April, so it's just with the editors at the moment who are probably pulling it apart and covering it in red pen as I speak. It's called ADHD in Sport. And it was because I was seeing so many athletes with ADHD and I didn't have anywhere to send them to kind of learn the tactics, learn more about it, to understand themselves. So that's why I wrote it. It looks at how sport and fitness can really help you with ADHD, because actually a lot of people I interviewed for it talked about their sport almost self-medicating them. Because they'd been doing sport for so long, it might be when they stopped or they had a break that they realised how beneficial sport had been to their ADHD. But then we also look at all of the different traits that might show up in an individual's ADHD and how that can impact their sport. Some of them tend to be quite helpful. Hyperfocus can make you really, really work hard. Some of that intensity of response to things makes you very fast. We see a lot of ADHD in sports like basketball because you've got those immediate responses. But we also look at some of the downsides of it, where it might be very hard to concentrate when a coach is trying to give you instructions, or if they give you 3 and 4 instructions in a row, no chance of you being able to respond to it. So it looks at both those pros and cons. Then we look at tactics for well-being. because you might well underfuel if you're on medication, because the medication suppresses your appetite. How to sleep, because there's often a lot of sleep issues that come up with ADHD. So and how to kind of take care of yourself with some of the stress, because if you're neurodiverse, trying to function in a world that is designed for neurotypical people, life is really stressful. And if you're having to handle that kind of stress, as well as all the stresses of sport, as well as often things like sensory issues. One of the girls I interviewed in the book had played in the FA Cup final. It was like amazing opportunity, but you walk onto the pitch at Wembley and you've got flashing advertising banners the whole way around the outside, and instantly that's distracting when you're supposed to be focused on the ball. So all of those elements on the wellbeing side. We then look at loads of different tactics for how you train and how you do well in training. And then we look at all the tactics you need for competition days and analysing your competition. Then we look at the co-occurring disorders, conditions that tend to come alongside ADHD. Many people will have 2 or 3 things at the same time. Then we look at medication, because actually it's a really big issue for people to understand whether they want medication or not and how to deal with it. And then in between each chapter, I interviewed 8 athletes, a coach and a parent about how they've kind of navigated their journey with medication, with their ADHD, in different sports. So hopefully people can kind of feel less alone while they read it, but also see that kind of some of the things that they deal with are things other people have managed to handle, and how they might have had some tactics to do that.
Yeah, that's going to be so valuable, you know, not only for the athletes to understand why they might be behaving a certain way, but also for their parents, because if their parents don't have the same approach, then they're going to think, why is my son tantruming, or why is my son not eating enough because he needs to, because he's got to do all this sport. So it's really valuable for both parties. And
so I should have mentioned there's 2 extra chapters. There's one for coaches on how to coach athletes with ADHD, and there is one for supporters. So it's not just parents, it's actually partners of, because that can really help of like, rather than the frustration of like, well, why did you forget your kit again? Why are you late to this bit? To be able to understand no one's doing it on purpose. No one's trying to wind you up. It's part of that condition. And it can hopefully help you have a more harmonious home life. Yeah,
brilliant. Well, I look forward to that. I shall be reading that and passing it on to athletes that I may know who you know are struggling a little bit with that. So brilliant. What about the realist then? So how does a realist perhaps differ from a VIP?
So I'm a realist. I've got no perfection in me. I'd love a bit of perfectionism, but there's none. We need much more motivation. So we need, I need a coach to kick me up the bum and make me do the work. So actually the coach I'm working with at the moment, I was like, I don't need complicated sessions. I don't need to know why I'm doing most of it. I just need someone to make me do it. And if I know I need to message you on a Sunday night with all the sessions done, I will get them done. Because I'm quite happy to let things drop, and I'm very happy to wing it. And I don't want to be the kind of person that wings it when it comes to my sport. So we need more motivation. We absolutely need a goal to work towards, almost like that feel the fear. Do something every day that scares you into something that means like you're looking at it going, wow, I really need to train for that. That's totally me. Whereas if you're a very intelligent perfectionist, you don't need anyone to push you. You need a coach to hold you back. You need a coach to give you the reality check of you've trained too much, you're going to get injured if you do more. This is why, let's look after you a bit more. The realists, we need the kick up the bum.
I see that, and I think that with the ones who need a little bit more motivation, you use the self-determination theory quite a lot, don't you? Tell us a bit about that.
That's my favourite theory, which is really geeky. So self-determination theory suggests there are 3 types of motivation, and it's used in fitness and sport, but it's actually used across life. So there's a motivation, like, I cannot be bothered, I'm just going to sit on the sofa with my cup of tea. There's extrinsic motivation, I'm doing something because I will earn something from it. So we work for money, or we run for a prize. And then there's intrinsic motivation, where you will do it anyway because you love the feeling of it, and you love the social life, and you love all the elements. So there's nothing tangible that you can grasp that is I'm doing this because of this. You do it because you love it. And I think of intrinsic motivation being that kind of really holy grail. And that's what's really tricky when someone is a really good amateur and then they become a professional, because they've got to being a really good amateur by being intrinsically motivated. They train because they love it. And now they have to train because they need to keep sponsors happy, or they need to earn money to be able to continue. So it's quite a tricky area there. But I think if you can really help people understand their intrinsic motivation about why they do, what they love from it, it really helps them do more of it.
Yeah.
And self-determination theory offers 3 kind of pillars that you'll recognize as the first 3 pillars in the 10 pillars of success, because they just make such perfect sense. So it's belonging, and not feeling like we fit in. We're not trying to squish ourselves into what somebody else believes we should be. It's about really feeling like you're truly yourself and you still belong. People just love you for who you are. Then we have mastery. So not trying to get certain outcomes, which is one of the biggest issues for people who are perfectionists. It becomes about the outcome. How am I being judged? It's about the mastery and what you put in. And then it's about autonomy. So having a real choice and a voice over what you do and how you do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest one I see for teenagers, is that desperation for autonomy. But you can't yet because you're too young. And you've still got parents that tell you what to do. And you've got coaches that probably know better than you how to do it, but you want to stretch yourself.
Yes.
And that's the real hard one, I think, for a lot of people. So you can start to really focus on mastery, and you can start to find your tribe. And even actually for teens, that one's still quite tricky. Because if you're in quite a small school, or there's only one like hockey club near you, and you don't necessarily feel like you belong there, there's not much choice.
Yeah.
Going off to university or starting to leave home and shape your own life more allows you to build that belonging, find your tribe. Those 3 elements are all really key to helping you feel more motivated.
It resonates a lot with me, because one of the reasons I set up the charity was because our son was on the England pathway for hockey, and I was shocked at how expensive the kit was, and that you just had to be able to go and afford to buy the £500 worth of kit that you needed to pitch up with at the training sessions. So that was one of the reasons we set it up. But I also then noticed with him that he would train for like it wasn't a bleep test, it was like a 3-minute run test they had to do. Yeah, and he trained and trained. He beasted himself over the Christmas holidays. I remember one Christmas he was on the treadmill, he wasn't eating dessert, he was literally beasting himself. Went back and they never tested them, and he was really upset. He was like, I'm trying so hard. He filled out all his development planning from, I think it was TAS sent him like a development plan, and he filled it all out, never got any feedback. So he wasn't getting the mastery element. And then he was going off to Bristol and he wasn't with friends from school. So he didn't really have that cohesiveness and the belonging. And then we were probably telling him, go on, Ed, this is great. This is, you're on the way to playing hockey for England. And he didn't really have any autonomy. So the whole shebang was just a bit of a disaster. And then, he said, Mum, I don't want to play hockey for England. And so we pulled out of it. So I really understood why he wanted to come out of it when I knew about the model.
I think it's the bit I find really hard for parents. My daughter's only 8, but I can see it all coming for us too. You can see what they're good at, and you can see their skills, and you can see what they need to put into it. But if they're not up for putting into it, it's not going to make any difference. No. You can push somebody with, say, academics, and you can force somebody to sit at a desk and do the work and to work through things, and some of it will go in. But if you force someone to do sport, they cannot play with their heart. And that's the bit that makes the difference. And it is the bits like I never want to see anyone overtraining. I work a lot with people with red S and burnout, but I do see that the athletes that do the little extra bit because it gives them the confidence. There was one athlete over lockdown, and they set the goal at the start of lockdown in a ball sport to do 100 shots in a basket every day.
Yeah.
And we worked out by the time they'd come out of lockdown and gone to do a selection meeting or something, they'd done 10,000 shots. And it's just those little extra bits. And no one was saying, you've got to go do this.
Yeah.
It was them. And that's the autonomy bit of like, that's what makes the difference and what will get them onto a pathway. But it has to come from them.
Totally self-driven. Yeah. Yeah. They've got to be self-driven, and they've got to love it. Like you say, they've got to love it. Love the process.
Yes. And be up for all those long runs. And if you go into anything kind of, oh, I'm not sure about this, it's really hard to find it. That motivation at the start is really important. And then to find the joy in the process and to find the wins along the way, it really, really helps.
When you work with your younger athletes, what do they typically say is their reason why they do it?
Friends, fun.
Yeah.
So there's some research in the US, and they looked at, I think it was like under 10s and the top 100 reasons that they played sport. And fun and social and all those elements were in the top 10. Winning was number 81.
Yeah.
And yet you get to about 12 or 13 and all of the squads seem to start selecting people based on ability and winning, and the coaches are focused on winning, and then half the kids drop out.
Yeah.
I mean, we have something called Friday Night Fives where we are in London. It's a big deal locally. But you've got people selecting 6-year-olds as to whether, and you'll hear the coaches going, this is not for fun. This is for competition. We are performers. You're just watching going like, they're 6.
Age 6. Yeah. They're going to totally put them off. They're not going to be doing it at 16. They've started at 6 with all that pressure.
I know. I feel like I should walk around with business cards going like, come and see me in a few years when they've destroyed your motivation.
Yes.
But yes, kids do it because they love it. It's fun.
Yeah. I as well as using your books for athletes, there's a book, I can't remember the name of the lady who wrote it. She was a squash player, and I think she wrote it with, I want to say Laura somebody. Anyway, it's called The Winning Parent. And I don't send it to many parents because with Cass and Friends, we don't have many parents like this, but just occasionally we get the feeling that the parent needs to sort of back off a little bit or let the child sort of enjoy it a bit more. If you get the feeling from the athlete that that's the situation, how do you handle that?
That's the hardest part of my job. I think, in fact, I am giving a lecture on Wednesday to students at Swansea Uni, sports psychology students there, on how to work with under 10s. And I start with kind of where have I gone wrong? And I've had parents that bribed their kids with like McDonald's or KFC to come to sessions. I've had parents that have lied about their kids' age, because normally I won't see them under 11. But kids tell you really quickly how old they actually
are. Of course they are.
Oh my God, I've been screamed at by parents because their kid didn't make the Olympics. It's really hard because you feel for them, and you know that they can see the talent and the skills that their kid has gone through. You know that they have probably spent every weekend for however many years driving up and down the country, trying to motivate their kids, spending a fortune on all the kit, having to sacrifice family things because they had a competition. Like, you know how much parents have given to it.
Yes.
But if the kid doesn't want it, the kid doesn't want it.
No.
We had to make I had to really actively think about how I would deal with this with my daughter. She gets quite nervous about some things. So when she'd start a new thing, she'd quite like the first week. By the second week, she'd be actively terrified. And I remember when she was doing ballet classes when she was really little, I was the mum that had to get up in the ballet class and dance with her because she was too scared to go on her own. And it was like, at what point do we say, enough, this is silly, you can quit if you want to? So we get to a point where she has to do 3 sessions of something. And after that, if she doesn't feel comfortable, she doesn't love it, she can quit. But it does usually mean I've had to pay for a whole term of something. You only get 1 free session. And I think she's found the areas she loves now. We're okay for a bit. But yeah, it's quite a hard one to get that balance of how do you motivate and push and give brilliant opportunities and not let their own fears get in the way. But without being some kind of monster that is forcing them to do something where they feel uncomfortable.
So what advice do you give parents? I think I've sort of tried to say things like, when you're giving them praise, focus on the process that they did, you know, how well they looked for space if they're on the hockey pitch, or you know, what advice can you give to our parents listening maybe of some of these teenage athletes?
The most important thing is to never focus on the outcome. So there's like, I will try so even with all my athletes and my daughter, I will never ask her what results she got. So they do cross country at the end of every half term, and it's literally like 3 laps of the field. I really want to know how she did, but I can't ask, because that emphasizes that position is important. Whereas what I'll ask is, did you work hard today? Was it fun? Did you sprint at the end? That's what matters. So there's some really interesting research that the LTA have done, where they put little camcorders in cars for athletes on the way to and from matches to see what parents talk about. What I tend to find is that kids do not want sport-specific advice from their parents. It doesn't matter how good the parents are at the sport. In fact, I was once doing a workshop where a kid said, God, I hate it when my dad gives me advice. And I was like, does he know anything about the sport? He was like, yeah, he's got an Olympic gold medal in it. But still, that kid did not want advice. So it's not personal to any parent.
No.
They don't want that advice. They might want a reminder of what they've been working on. So you can do like, did the coach say you should be focusing on anything today? That's usually fine. Otherwise, I would just set up your thing that you have on the way to matches or on the way to competition. So some people have certain playlists. A lot of people have like a podcast that's like mum and daughter on the way to hockey matches. This is what they listen to. So it takes some of that pressure away in the quiet car of like, no, we should be talking about this. The big thing, there's a guy called Richard Shorter who's Non-Perfect Dad. He does some brilliant work.
I know him.
Yeah. He always says the thing to say to your kids before they play is, I love watching you play. You don't need to go, what's your coach need to say to you? What do you need to work on? What should you focus on? I love watching you play. So what I find this happens a lot in tennis as well, partly because of the costs, is that it becomes very expensive to have lots of kind of individual coaching. So a lot of parents will swat up on the sport and then try and coach their kids.
Interesting.
Their kids do not need 2 coaches. More than a coach, your child needs a parent. And they need to know they are loved, even if they screw up, even if they have a tantrum on court and lob their racket across and they behave appallingly. They need to know they are still loved. And so trying to coach your child is really tricky. And actually, one of the interviewees in I Can, the teenage book, was an I think he'd lead scorer in rugby for England ever. And he's the coach at his son's club. Has to be incredibly careful he doesn't coach his son. Because you need to come off the pitch and know that dad loves you. Doesn't matter if you just screwed up or you missed a shot or something. Dad loves you anyway. So the more you can separate, I'm not here to coach you, I'm just here to be mum or dad.
So important. Such good advice. Brilliant. Thank you. So we've touched on tennis players there, actually, because we have some tennis players, and this sort of when we talk about the pressure and the fear of failure and the tension that can come in somebody's body when they're anxious and nervous, other specific sports, maybe like tennis, where you see that affecting them more than others? Like in an Ironman, I could be super nervous in the middle of my bike, but it's not really going to affect me too much. But in tennis, if they're super tense and super anxious, does it have more of an impact?
I think it impacts each of us differently based on our own physiology.
Yeah.
And then it impacts us based on what our sport requires.
Mm.
So the physiological impact I tend to see if someone's threat system is triggered because they're feeling super nervous or they're worried about it's usually the outcome of the event and what it says about you as a person. So if I am a tennis player, that's who I believe I am, and I screw up a tennis match, I am a failure, and that feels devastating. So as soon as your brain starts going to outcome, it starts to trigger the threat system. The threat system will give you negative head chatter that's trying to talk you out of trying. It wants you to stay in your comfort zone and not stretch yourself. And then it releases adrenaline and cortisol. As they flood your body, first place they tend to go is your tummy, which is why so many athletes feel sick or nauseous or go to the toilet a lot before a competition. I mean, before an Ironman, it's hysterical to try and take a photo. It sounds dodgy, but to take a photo of like the hundreds of toilets and the hundreds of people standing in front of them, because your body wants to be light to escape this scary thing it's imagining.
Yes.
Tummy, most people tend to notice. Then your heart rate goes up and your breathing rate goes up. Those are bad because as well as your brain looking out for physical threats and psychological threats, it also looks out for physiological threats. So if your heart rate and your breathing rate go up, your brain goes, whoa, something's wrong. Let's send around more adrenaline and cortisol. And that's when people tend to get panic attacks because it's continuous. Then the big one that we see in tennis players, golfers, snooker players, squash, anywhere you are using a piece of equipment to hit a ball, is that your back and shoulder muscles get super tight and tense. And so if you've spent hours precisely practicing how to hit a ball with a piece of equipment so it goes in the right place, you only need a slight amount of tension to be able to go send it in entirely the wrong place. So in tennis, it'll be people will come, I can't stop double serving is the one that I tend to see. In golf, it's people getting things like the yips.
Yes.
And then the other one is that we don't need our senses if we are feeling under threat. We just need to run in a straight line away from the scary thing. So we switch off our peripheral vision. We can just narrow in. Some sports, that's quite helpful. 100-meter sprinting, you don't want peripheral vision. You just want to go in a straight line as fast as possible. But you also switch off your taste, your sight, your smell, your hearing. So that might mean you react slightly slower to the gun going off, swimming or something that takes a bit longer for you. The interesting one where I see that is actually not in sport at all, but I work a lot in the wine industry, working with sommeliers and people who pass the Master Sommelier exam.
Wow.
So the MS, I know only 31 women have ever passed it. I think we're up to 100 and something men. So it's harder to pass this exam than to swim the Channel or to climb Everest. 85% of people fail. Really, really difficult exam of like 6 wines in front of you. It's got lots of different elements, but the tasting bit, 6 wines, you have to be able to say where it's from, what year, all of the grapes, and be able to identify any wine in the world in that moment.
Right.
So you go into it going, well, I'm quite likely to fail, and I'm being judged by my peers. So, and this dictates the rest of my career, basically. Incredibly stressful, right? And then you switch off your sense of taste and your sense of smell.
Awkward.
So we tend to have our own personal elements that switch on and off, and it is impacted by the sport or the activity that we're trying to do. The more you get to know yours, the easier it becomes.
Yes.
Because then you can start to go, this is my threat system. It's not me.
Yes.
And with my athletes, we name our threat systems.
Yes.
So that you can start to have a different chat with them. And you start to kind of almost reassure them and soothe them. We're not trying to shut them down. We're not trying to ignore them, because that just doesn't work. But we're actively trying to be able to sit alongside some of those thoughts without it triggering our threat system.
Yeah. So that links on to my next question that I wanted to ask you. One of the tools that you use is the acceptance and commitment therapy, isn't it? And then you've created your own model, Brave.
Yeah, so acceptance and commitment therapy is an amazing approach that's used by many, many practitioners now. Most sports psychs will probably be using a lot of it, because it's about stopping fighting the worries and the fears and everything, and accepting that we're trying to do a difficult thing. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes stuff's going to go against us. The longer and more uncontrollable your race, the harder it's going to be. Something like an Ironman, there's so many elements you can't control. And if you try, you just get tight and tense and you can't perform properly. So it's about learning to accept it. But it's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway, in the service of your values. So doing things in the way that you want to be. And from that, I have quite a specific approach called Be Brave. So the B stands for your brain, and just helping people understand the different functions of your brain and why it feels like it misbehaves. Yeah. The E is for expertise. We're trying to move you away from outcomes and much more towards your own expertise. And then the B of Brave is being aware of your thoughts, not trying to shut them down, not trying to get rid of them, noticing them without reacting. The R is reassigning them to your safety seeker. Yeah. So it's like, it's not me. I have lazy Larry who lives in my head. So it's like, I'm not thinking this. Lazy Larry is trying to tell me to slow down. The A is for advocacy. So it's about really understanding what you can do well, how you are doing it, the things you've struggled with before that you've overcome, the setbacks you've handled, the difficult stuff you've done. So you're able to soothe yourself more because you're reminding yourself of what's brilliant. The V is for your values. So, for example, one of my values is bravery. So it's really important for me to go, okay, I'm scared of going harder because it's going to hurt. I know I can, because I've actually run faster than this and I've had a higher heart rate than this before. And I'm going to do it anyway because I want to be the kind of person that's brave. And that's the message I want to teach my daughter. You kind of bring some of that emotion into it. And then the E is for really engaging different tactics and tools that we work on. So when someone's worked on that process with me, it's about 6 to 8 weeks, but they will come out just with a 1-pager chart. That it's like, when I get to this difficult point in my race or my competition, I'm going to notice so-and-so. I'm going to reassign my thoughts to them. So they're not my thoughts. I'm noticing lazy Larry is telling me this. I'm going to remind myself of what I can do brilliantly. I'm going to remind myself of why I'm going to do it brilliantly. And I'm going to engage a few tools. And you can actually end up getting that down to just a few words, but it helps totally change the conversation in your head. From like, I can't do this, or I'm going to fail, or this is going to be embarrassing, I might be judged, through to, I've got this, and I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to lift my head up high. And those little things kind of keep you on the right track. Yeah.
Amazing. I love it. Just because what I love about your work for athletes is that it's so helpful with the tools and strategies that you have to take them on that specific journey to sort of, as you say, that's maybe a 6 to 7 week process. But at the end of that process, they can, in the moment when they really need to know how to behave, that's all embedded into them, and it's all embedded through the work you've done.
It takes a time, to be honest. So we know it's about 66 days on average to make a habit. So actually, an athlete in that moment, after 4 or 5 weeks, won't remember, oh, Josie said to do this. So we do use lots of visuals. I will often have people, I must get through a lot of stickers, but we put stickers on tops of bikes, we write on our hands, we have tape on our wrists. So much stuff gets stuck on water bottles. Somebody even got a tattoo, but I wouldn't.
You could do temporary. One of our athletes did a lovely temporary tattoo.
There you go.
So nice.
Anything like that, perfect. And because you need a visual reminder in that moment. So often my message to myself when I'm racing is make Hattie proud. Because I know that's going to make me push harder. And I'll just write it on my hand. I'll have it flash up on my phone, on my watch. So anything like that where you've got that visual is really helpful to remind you, oh, I know, I'm remembering why I'm doing this. Or get your supporters in the crowd, get mum and dad to shout the right thing at the right time. That can work really well.
Josie, I'm looking at the time and I really have a zillion more questions for you and I can't ask them all. one of my one last question. One of my favourite worksheets or sheets that I use with the athletes when we're setting some of their process goals is the performance profiling sheet that you use. What's your well, this is too hard a question, but what's one of your top 3 sheets or worksheets or tool that you really enjoy using and find has the most benefit?
I like doing what if planning.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because I think the idea of getting your thoughts, and there's research to back it up, getting your thoughts out of your head on a piece of paper of all the things you're worried about just helps you rationalise quite a lot of them. But then you can also look at how do I prevent it happening? And what do I do in that moment if it happens? So I think that one's really, really helpful.
Yes.
My favourite thing to get athletes to do is to draw their safety seeker. So that little creature that lives in your head and wants you to stay in your comfort zone and doesn't want you to go and do a really difficult, tricky thing that you might fail at, we get them to draw it. And a lot of athletes are really creative and really good at art. So I get to see some amazing pictures back. That always helps. It's really nice. And one of the things I like doing with adults actually is we really work on purpose. Like, why were you put on this earth? Because when you know, it's much easier to find the motivation to do the things that help you reach that. And I will often get them to write a Wikipedia page for themselves and to really then think about kind of what do I want to do so strongly that other people notice it? And so they write Wikipedia pages, and some are really creative. They will literally look like a proper Wikipedia page. I think that's really helpful too. That really is lovely to see.
Amazing. Josie, we're going to have to stop because I want 2 minutes with you afterwards just to say thank you. But huge thank you for your time this morning. It's been so nice talking to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Athletic Ambitions. We hope you found this episode of interest, and if so, be sure to send this to your family and friends who might also benefit. If you're interested in donating to Cass and Friends, the links are in the description, and we'll hope to see you in the next episode. Thanks, Tom and Fee.